Hello and welcome to India Reads. We are reading The Enchantress of Florence. We've finished four chapters. We are on the fifth chapter, and we've learned a lot about Akbar, his wives, his relationships with his wives, especially with his fictitious wife Joda, his expectations from his children, and his wish for to have somebody who could be his heir, not only in the sense of the kingdom but also who could take on his thoughts, because he also doesn't have a good friend with whom he could discuss or share his thoughts as an equal. This is where we're told that this is a stage where the yellow haired young man has come to his city. So let's start from where we left. In the early morning, Mohini, the sleepless whore of the Hatyapal brothel, awoke her foreign guest. He came away quickly and twisted her roughly into his arms, conjuring a knife from thin air and holding it against her neck. Don't be stupid, she said. I could have killed you 100 times last time, and do not think that I didn't think about it when you're snoring loud enough to wake the emperor in his palace. She had offered him two rates, one for a single act and the other only slightly higher for the whole night. Which is better value? He asked her. People always say it's the all night rate, she replied gravely. But most of my visitors are too old or drunk or opium stupid or incompetent that even doing it once is beyond a lot of them. And so the rate for a single will almost certainly save you money. I'll pay you double for a all night rate, he said, if you promise to stay beside me all night. It's been a long time since I spent a whole night with a woman, and a woman's body lying beside me sweetens my dreams. You can waste your money if you want, I won't stop you, she said cold heartedly, but there hasn't been any sweetness left in me for years. She was so thin that her name amongst the other hoes was Skeleton, and those clients who could afford her hired her together with her antithesis, an obese whore named Mattress, in order to enjoy the two extremes of what the female form had to offer. First, an unyielding dominance of bone, and then a flesh that engulfed. Skeleton ate like a wolf, greedily and fast, and the more she ate, the fatter Mattress became. And it was suspected that the two whores had made a pact with the devil, and in hell it would be Skeleton who was grotesquely overweight for all eternity, while Mattress rattled bonily around with her nipples on a flat chest looking like wooden plugs. She was a doly earthy prostitute of the Hatyapal, meaning that the terms of her employment was that she was literally married to the job and would only leave on her earthy or a funeral bier. She had to go through a parody of a wedding ceremony, arriving to the mirth of a street rabble on a donkey cart instead of the usual dolly or palanquin. Enjoy your wedding day, Skeleton, it's the only one you'll have, shouted one tout. But the other prostitutes poured a chamber pot of warm urine upon him from the upstairs balcony, and that shut him up just fine. The groom was the brothel itself, represented symbolically by Madame Rangoli Bibi, a whore so old, toothless, and squinty that she had become worthy of respect, and so fierce that everyone was scared of her. Even the police officers whose job it theoretically was to close her business down, but who did not make a move against her in case she gave them a lifetime's bad luck by fixing them with an evil eye. The other more traditional explanation for the brothel's survival was that it was owned by an influential noble of the court, or else, as the city gossips convinced, not a noble but a priest, maybe one of the mystics praying non-stop at the Chisti tomb. But nobles go in and out of favor, and priests as well. Bad luck, on the other hand, is forever to fear of Rangoli Bibi's crossed eyes was at least as powerful as an unseen holy or aristocratic protector. Mohini's bitterness was not the result of being a whore, which was a job like any other job, and gave her a home and food and clothing, without which she said she would be no better than a pie dog and would in all likelihood die like a dog in a ditch. It was aimed at one single woman, her former employee, the 14-year-old lady Manbai of Amer, currently residing at Sikri, a young hussy who was already receiving in secret the eager attention of her cousin Crown Prince Selim. Lady Manbai had 100 slaves, and Mohini the skeleton was one of her favorites. When Prince arrived, perspiring from the hard work of galloping around killing animals in the heat of the day, Mohini was the head of the retinue whose task it was to remove all his clothing, massage his pale skin with scented cooling oils. Mohini was the one who chose the perfume, sandalwood or musk, patchouli or rose, and Mohini it was who performed the privileged function of massaging his manhood to prepare him for his mistress. Other slaves fanned him and rubbed his hands and feet, but only the skeleton could touch the royal sex. This was because of her experience in preparing the unguents necessary for heightening of sexual desire and the prolongation of the actual congress. She made the paste of tamarind and cinnamon or dried ginger and pepper, with which, when mixed with the honey of a large bee, gave a woman intense pleasure without requiring much exertion from the man, and allowed the man also to experience a sensation of warmth and a kind of squeezing palpitation that was extremely pleasurable. She applied the paste sometimes to her mistress' vagina, sometimes to the prince's member, usually to both. The results was held by both parties to be excellent. It was her mastery of the male drug known as the ones that made men into horses that undid her. One day she ordered a castration of a male guest and boil male goat, sorry, and boil its testes in milk alive, which she salted and peppered them, fried them in ghee, and finally chopped them up into a delicious tasting mince. The preparation was to be eaten, not rubbed upon the body, and she fed it to the prince on a silver spoon, explaining that it was a medicine which would allow him to make love like a horse, 5 or 10 or 20 times, even without losing his force. In case of a particularly virile young woman, it could facilitate 100 consecutive ejaculations. Delicious, said the prince, and ate heartily. The next morning he emerged from the mistress boudoir, leaving her on the point of death. Ha ha! He shouted at Mohini on his way out. That was fun. It would be 47 days and nights before Lady Manbai could even think about having sex again. And during that time, the prince, when he visited her, was fully understanding of the damage she had wrought, behaved in a manner both contrite and solicitous, and fucked the slaves instead, asking more often for the favors of the skinny creature who had endowed him with such superhuman sexual powers. Lady Manbai could not refuse him, but inwardly she raged with jealousy. When it became plain after the notorious night of 101 copulations that Mohini the skeleton's tolerance for sex was infinite, and that the prince was incapable of breaking her as he had almost broken his mistress, the slave girl's faith was sealed. The jealousy of Lady Manbai grew implacable, and Mohini was expelled from the household, leaving her with nothing but her knowledge of the preparations that drove men mad with desire. She fell in fell a long way from palace to a brothel, but her powers of enchantment served her well and made her the most popular of the women of the bawdy house of Hatyapal. She hoped, however, for revenge. If fate ever brings that bitch into my power, I will smear her with a paste so powerful that even jackals will come to fuck her. She will be fucked by crows and snakes and leopards and water buffaloes, and in the end there will be nothing left of her but a few soggy strands of her hair which I shall burn, and that will be the end of it. But she is going to marry Prince Salim, so pay attention to me. For a woman like myself, revenge is an unattainable luxury, like partridges or childhood. For some reason, she was talking to the yellow haired newcomer as she had never spoken to any of her tricks. Perhaps because of his exotic appearance, his yellow hair, his alertness, cleansing alertness. You must have put a spell on me, she said in a disturbed voice, because I never let any of my visitors ever see me in daylight, much less tell them the story of my life. She had lost her virginity at the age of 11 to her father's brother, and the baby that was born was a monster which her mother took away and drowned without showing it to her for the fear that she would begin to lose hate her future. She needn't have worried, Mohini said, because as it happens, I was blessed with an equable disposition and a fondness for the sex act was not even that thimblecock of a despoiler could change. But I was never a warm person, and since the injustice I have suffered at the hand of Lady Manbai, the chill in my vicinity has increased. In the summer, men like the cooling effect of my proximity, but in winter, I don't get so much work. Prepare me, said the yellow haired man, because today I have to go on to the court on an important business. I must be at my best or perish. If you can afford it, she answered, I shall make you desi- smell as desirable as any king. She began to turn his body into a symphony for the nose, for which she told him that the price would be one gold moher coin. I'm overcharging you naturally, she warned him, but he simply shook his left wrist as she gasped when she saw those gold coins held between the forefingers. Do a good job. He gave her all three. For these three mohurs, she said, people will believe that you are an angel from paradise if that's what you want them to think. And when you're finished up doing whatever you have to do, you can have me and the mattress together, satisfying your wildest dreams for a week for nothing extra. She sent a metal wash tub and filled it herself, mingling hot and cold water in the ratio of a bucket to three. Next, she soaped him all over with soap made from aloe, sandal, and camphor to make your skin fresh and open before I put on your royal airs. Then from beneath the bed she produced a magic box of fragrances wrapped up in a careful cloth. Before you reach the emperor's presence, you will have to satisfy many other men, she said. So the perfume for the emperor would be hidden at first beneath the fragrances that will please lesser personages, which will fade away when you reach the imperial presence. After that, she got to work, anointing him with civet and violet, magnolia and lily, narcissus and calembic, as well as drops of other occult fluids whose names he did not even like to ask. Fluids extracted from the sap of Turkish and Cypriot and Chinese trees, as well as wax from the intestines of the whale. By the time she she had finished, he was convinced he smelled like a cheap whorehouse, which is where he was after all, and he regretted his decision to ask for the skeleton's help. But out of courtesy, he kept his regrets to himself. His little paper bag, clothes. He took out of his little paper bag clothes of a finery that made skeleton gasp. Did you murder someone to get those, or you are really somebody at all? She wondered. He didn't answer. To look like a person of consequence on the road was to attract the attentions of men of violence. To look like a hobo at court was an idiocy of a different kind. I have to go, he said. Come back later, she told him. Remember what I said about the free offer. He put on his inevitable overcoat in spite of the budding heat of the morning and set out to do what he had to do. Miraculously, the perfumes of the skeleton went ahead of him and smoothed his way instead of showing him off and telling him to go to the gate on the city's far side and to wait in line for permission to enter the courtyard of public audience. The guards went out of their way to assist him, sniffing the air as if it bore good news and bursting with improbable welcoming smiles. The chief of the guardhouse dispatched a manner to fetch a royal adjutant who arrived looking irritable about being summoned. As he approached the visitor, there was a shift in the breeze and an entirely new scene filled the air. A scent whose subtlety was too delicate for the guards' coarse noses, but made the adjutant think all of a sudden of the first girl that he had ever loved. He volunteered to go personally to the house of Birbal to arrange things and returned to say that all necessary approvals had been given, and he now had the authority to invite the visitor to enter the palace quarters. The visitor was asked inevitably for his name, and he answered without hesitation, "You may call me Mogot," he said in immaculate Persian. Mogot del Amour, at his service, a gentleman of Florence, presently on business for England's Queen. He was wearing a velvet hat with a white feather on it, held in place by mustard colored jewel, and duffing his hat, he bent down in low bow that showed everyone watching, for he had attracted a substantial crowd whose dreamy-eyed, grinning faces pressed once again the omniscient powers of the skeleton's work, that he possessed a courtier's skill, politeness, and grace. "Mr. Ambassador," said the adjutant, bowing in return, "this way, please." Yet a third fragrance had now been released as the earlier scents faded away, and this one filled the air with fantasies of desire. As he walked through the red world of the palaces, the man who went by the name of Mogod del Amor noticed the fluttering movements behind the curtain windows and the lattice screens. In the darkness of the windows, he had imagined that he could make out a host of shining diamond eyes. Once he saw a jeweled hand making an ambiguous gesture that might have been an invitation. He had underestimated the skeleton. In a way, she was an artist to rival any that could be found in this fabled city of painters, poets, and song. Let's see what she has in store for the emperor, he thought. If if it is as seductive as the early secrets, then I'm home and dry. He held on tightly onto the Tudor scroll, and his stride lengthened as his confidence grew. At the center of the main chamber of the House of Private Audience was a red sandstone tent from which there hung what seemed to the visitor's unaccustomed eye to be a great bunch of stylized some bananas. Bananas. Wide branches of red stone ran from the top of the tree trunk to the four corners of the room. In between these branches hung canopies of silk embroidered in silver and gold, and under the canopies and canopies and bananas, with his back to the thick trunk of the stone tree, stood the most frightening man in the world, with one exception, a small, sugary mass of enormous intellect and girth, beloved of the emperor, hated by envious rivals, a flatterer, a fawnet, an eater of 30 pounds of food every day, a man capable of ordering his cook to prepare 1,000 different dishes in the evening meal. It a man for whom reminiscence was not a fantasy but a minimum requirement of life. Okay, I'm going to stop here because I'm going a bit slow and I'm finding it a little difficult to read. But we've only done a few pages, and what have we learned here? That we've learned a little bit about the prostitutes in the place where the yellow hat gentleman was there. Now he's called himself with a different name. He called himself Okello in the boat. Here he is calling himself Mogot del Amor, and he says that he's from Florence. He is obviously, he gets chatty with the lady with whom he spent the night. She offers him two rates, one for a single act and one for the entire night. He takes the one for the entire night and makes her promise that she would sleep with him throughout the night because he wants the warmth of a lady next to him throughout the night. And that's why he learns a little bit, or rather we learn lot more about this lady Mohini, who has experienced uh, uh, experience working with the prince. She used to make pace for the prince so as to elevate his sexual pleasure, and that one of them made him have sex with his favorite courtesan uh, or prostitute or mistress, Manbai, for over 100 times. So that left the lady completely tired, and then he would keep coming to the same establishment and ask for other ladies, and he would especially ask for her, Mohini, who was also known as Skeleton because she was very bony, and she would continue to pleasure him. So obviously she knew the arts of making pace and heightening the sexual pleasure, and this kind of was something that not in the same context but in the context of attracting people to him, something that the yellow haired traveler would have liked to have when he entered the court of Akbar. So she promises to make him perfumes that will attract everybody to him in the court, and she builds three layers of perfumes on him. uh, the first layer was for outside, where he would attract people in the court. The second layer was for the guards to let him in, and the third layer was to impress the emperor. Obviously the layers would start unveiling after the first unfades, the second comes out, the second phase, the third comes out. um, uh, the the traveler obviously was not initially impressed with it. He felt like he smelled like a whorehouse. The perfume, the fragrances smelled very cheap to him. But anyway, he went along with it. He had his own clothes, which were magnificent. He wanted to dress to impress, and there he was ready. dressed and he started walking the street, he could immediately see that people looked at him very reverentially, respectfully, and so there was something about the perfumes. He got through at the guards also, and one of the most important guards said that he will accompany him to the emperor. So obviously Okello, or rather here Mogot, whatever his name was, got the benefit of having slept the night with Mohini, and her perfumes have really helped him move ahead towards his mission. This is where we would like to leave. Did I miss anything important? Not really. There is a lot of information about Prince Salim, and that Manbai would eventually become his queen. There's a lot of description about how she made the paste, which heightened his sexual pleasure. And yeah, that's about it. So we will continue from where I've left now in the next video. Till then, take care, stay awesome, goodbye.